y'all were expecting some sort of pun at this point. Oh, I am not that kind of person. Ain't always gonna begin each episode with a pun, but I am going to begin this episode by freeing this Goron. So yeah, this is the Mississippi King welcoming y'all back to more Let's Play The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And in the last episode, we started on the Fire Temple after we got a ton of gold sculptures. And that was definitely something that helped a lot. We're making some progress on that gold sculpture hunt, and yes, I am going for all 100. I also picked up a heart piece on the way into the Fire Temple, and in this episode we're going to get through much more of the Fire Temple. The Fire Temple is admittedly a fairly straightforward dungeon, but I like it. You don't always gotta make a super complex dungeon. I think that's quite fine with dungeons, like they don't always have to do something amazing, you just have to get the point across. In this case, we just got a key, so let's actually head into the place where we saw the locked door. And, this dungeon can actually be really interesting to navigate. I mean, personally, I wouldn't say this is one of my favorite dungeons in the game, but, I mean, it's decent. But when given the choice between, like, the Forest Temple and this, I'd choose the Forest Temple, which is funny because originally I didn't much care for the Forest Temple just because of how confusing it was, but in hindsight I think that's part of what made it so great. The point of this dungeon is that throughout the dungeon you're going to be freeing several Gorons, and they'll be telling us some advice along the way. You want to free them because their cells often contain keys and maybe some other items, but I'm not sure. Nevertheless, you do still want to free them because, of course, you're the hero of time on all of that. And the hero of time saves people and all of that. But, yeah, one of the things that, well, what this dungeon does well, it does pretty well. I mean, it definitely feels very atmospheric, and, well, there's a lot of ambience to it. You're just not sure about what lies around the corner, even if it is fairly straightforward to navigate. I mean, it's not perhaps the most straightforward dungeon, because of course you've still gotta look for them Gorons, but for the most part, it's pretty easy. There was a Goron back in that room, so yeah. Now that we have him taken care of, let's look around. I mean, you want to save all of the Gorons, because of course that's just what you do. I mean, I think theoretically you could, actually talk to them without freeing them, but I'm not so sure what that would actually do, like if that would actually work. Maybe it would. I'm not sure what would happen. I mean, I've never tried it. But, yeah. Also, I feel I should mention this, but yeah, we're making some progress in this game. There are only 4 heart pieces left. And with regards to the other heart containers, the rest will be gotten through dungeons, besides the 4 heart pieces we need to get. And the remaining dungeons are pretty good. I mean, I think the Spirit Temple definitely exceeds... Actually, what am I saying? The Shadow Temple also exceeds the... It also exceeds the Fire Temple in terms of its atmosphere, because it's so strange and like, trust me when I say the Fire Temple is really atmospheric. When I saw it, I was pretty surprised that they were allowed to have it. I mean, you know how Nintendo is typically known for being family friendly, but I mean, trust me, that it's not exactly peachy in the Fire Temple, and I was surprised at what I saw. But yeah, let's just keep going. You've heard me rambling on enough, so let's actually make some progress. The more progress, the better we are. I really don't know what else I can say. I mean, like, as for the Fire Temple, that is. I mean, it's fairly linear, but not as linear as, like, say, the Shadow Temple. And actually, the Spirit Temple contains, like, a brilliant piece of design that, well, we'll talk more about that later. I don't want to spoil it or anything, but trust me, it's pretty clever, and it's not something you'd necessarily see coming. But, right here, like, the Fire Tunic, in addition to allowing you to survive in places with intense heat without having a timer that like when it runs out you die, it also lets you walk on lava or whatever that is without I'm pretty sure it's lava, but it lets you walk on it for longer without taking as much damage. So you can, with the regular tunic, you would constantly get hurt while walking on fire, on lava that is. And with the Fire Tunic, you still take some damage, but not as much. And that is definitely convenient. But as for this room, it's fairly straightforward. Actually, it's kind of embarrassing this took me so long to figure out on my first playthrough. I mean, it wasn't the hardest puzzle like, in my first playthrough, it wasn't the one I struggled with the most, but it was still kind of annoying. You basically just push a block onto the pillar of fire. Once you do that, you can then go on to the block and then ride it up. It's kind of interesting, but it's not one of the game's best puzzles, I must admit, just because it's fairly straightforward. And yeah, I know I said that being straightforward isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not talking about puzzles, because, like, a good puzzle is one that actually makes you think. Good puzzles are, in my mind, necessarily difficult puzzles. Or at least complex ones. Definitely ones that aren't straightforward. Or maybe they could, I guess, maybe be straightforward in the sense where the solution is obvious, but like figuring out how to get to that solution is hard. I'm not so sure that would make it straightforward, but whatever. I don't want to get into an argument over semantics. That is not what this episode is about. Okay, so don't go lawyering me.
Actually, this puzzle took me even longer to figure out. I don't know what I was saying about the previous puzzle taking me so long. Well, actually, it did take me a decent amount of time, but this puzzle took me even longer. It's actually really clever. Or, well, I mean, it looks somewhat simple at first, like, you shoot that switch, and so then it stops the flame from at an upper part of the whatever it is, it's at a higher point in this room. And so you need to get to that point. How do you get to it, though? I seem to be drawing a blank. This is why you should never play a game that you're rusty at. I mean, maybe next time, maybe I ought to consult a guide or something like that. I mean, doesn't really matter if you've already played it, so it's like, I wouldn't suggest playing this game with a guide, because that's part of the appeal of it, is being able to figure things out for yourself. But if you've already done it, it's like, then it's like you just end up, you can just do it regardless, and in the end I just end up making myself look like an idiot. I'm probably gonna have to speed this up anyway. I mean, if I do, then well, this is not gonna approach so well, will it? But it's like you need to get up there so you can push that block down, and my mind seems to be drawing a blank here. That is no good. But maybe I should. Oh, that's right. You just jump over to it. My goodness, I was trying to overthink this thing, and all this time you just jump over to it. Well, that's great. I tried to keep doing things in stupidly complex ways, and the solution was biting me in the face. So that ain't that just wow.
What makes this puzzle so clever is that, like, what you're supposed to do is to actually drop a bomb right here onto the switch to activate it that way, and that's clever. The game doesn't usually require you to think like that, but it's neat that it actually makes you think unconventionally. So yeah, I rather like that puzzle. It took me a while to figure out, but it was a pretty clever solution. Yeah, I guess since I ain't got much to talk about, well, I mean, besides these here boulders that are continuing to attack, that, like, roll around, I mean, I guess I'll talk about something else. I mean, to be clear, like, when I say that this game is the greatest game of all time, I don't mean that like, the other Zelda games aren't great. Like, of course they are. I mean, I am a Zelda fan, after all, not just a fan of this game in particular. And I guess that's one good thing that I can say about how like, it's become cool to diss this game and whatnot. I guess one good thing about it is that, like, it does mean that the other Zelda games are getting the recognition they deserve, because honestly, many other Zelda games are also what I would consider some of the greatest games of all time as well. Like, Majora's Mask is definitely, that's one of them, I'd say. I mean, I don't think they're the greatest, like, the number one, but they are still fantastic. And, like, the series is my number one favorite video game series of all time. And there's just so much to love about the series. There's, like, you can enjoy them only for the gameplay or only for the story, and I enjoyed both. There's a lot to love about the series. I like how it balances both, how, like, the gameplay is fun and engaging, and how you can constantly improve and get better, and the way that the items, they keep continuing to introduce new and interesting ways, and they augment the combat and exploration in great ways. And that's one of the many great things about the gameplay, but they also usually tell compelling stories about about a person who starts off as a nobody, and then through his efforts to improve, becomes better and overcomes his obstacles. And I think that's a very powerful, very emotional story. And that's one of the things that I love about this series, and personally, I think this game tells that kind of story the best. And with regards to the other stories, they do a great job of telling that as well. But what I think makes this story so great is that, like, you see Ganondorf, and when the first time you confront him, he just shoots an energy beam at you, and it just throws you to the side like it's nothing. And so it definitely conveys that you really are just a fly to him. And then you confront Phantom Ganon in the Forest Temple, and that drives the point home even further, because it's like, then he also shows you just how insignificant you are to Ganon. I mean, you saw how much Phantom Ganon just tossed me around. That was just embarrassing. But, yeah, and the idea is that, like, that's only a fraction of his power. So it only serves to enhance the fear that you have when, in regards to Ganon. He feels like an actual threat in this game. And that's one. I mean, to some extent, the other Zelda games do that too, and indeed, that there are many great characters and villains, and many great versions of Ganondorf. I'm not necessarily saying this version of Ganondorf is the best, and personally, my favorite version of Ganondorf is actually in the Wind Waker, but we'll get to that eventually. What I should be focusing on is this game. Also, as for, like, other villains, I think Sand from Twilight Princess is fantastic, for the most part. Again, we'll get into that later, but man, whenever he was on screen, he left an impact. And so, yeah, I do think it is good that other Zelda games that they're getting more attention, because it's like, for the longest time, pretty much no one would talk about Majora's Mask. I remember back when I played it, in 2010, it was fairly obscure, almost, well, maybe not necessarily obscure, I'm not sure that's the right word, but it certainly wasn't talked about much. Like, I only saw, like, a small handful of videos about it, and nowadays it's like pretty much everyone talks about it. So it's like they ended up recognizing it because it suddenly became more available thanks to various sources, like, and so it ended up becoming exponentially more popular than it was back then, because it was a pretty late release for the N64. That may explain why it wasn't so talked about that much back then. Like, I can attest that when I got a new Zelda game to play, like, it wasn't just a new game, it was an event. Like, the entirety of the Zelda series has always been, for me at least, just like this big thing that's like, the series in my mind is just a juggernaut in terms of quality, and the way in which it constantly tries to improve and innovate just made each game exciting. Like, I was always excited to see what new these the new Zelda games would bring to the table whenever I played them. I mean, not new in terms of release dates, I mean new in terms of new for me, like new for me to play. And yeah, that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about the series, is that you don't just play them, you experience them, and that's really what I can kind of describe many Zelda games as being. You don't necessarily play them, you experience them. And I don't mean that, like, they're not interactive or anything. I mean, like, it's less about the journey from point A to point B, so much as it is about the journey to get there. And that's what these games really feel like, is a journey. Both a personal journey and an actual journey in terms of both exploration, and it does sort of contain this, the series sort of contains this element of self-discovery that pervades the entire experience, and that's one of the things that I like so much about it, is that they're not, they don't remain static. It's all about looking for how you can change, and so that you can continue to adapt to the changing circumstances. But you can just keep heading this way, I believe, and we'll be able to find something important. What you want to do is head this way, of course, and you know that eye thingy? You want to shoot it, so that will open up the door, and we need to go through that door, and we can also end up falling off into the abyss. That's fantastic. Guess that means I'll have to see y'all next time in which we finish the Fire Temple. This is the Mississippi King signing out.